Okay, excellent. Welcome everybody for joining our Specializations information session, specifically for the MA in Climate and Society program. My name is Alfred Ayub. I work in admissions here at Columbia Climate School. And today's event is truly going to be focusing on the academic specializations offered within the MA Climate and Society program. That's going to be the true theme today. And joining me, we have two guest speakers that are really the architects of these specializations. First is Jeff Schlegelmilch, who's the director of the National Center for Disaster Preparedness and is also an adjunct associate professor of climate within Columbia Climate School, of course. And then also joining us is Danielle Smoller, who's the Associate Dean of Academic and Student Affairs, and also an adjunct associate professor within the Graduate School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. So thank you, everybody, for joining. I also want to just note that you are encouraged to use the Q&A function to ask questions. I am going to ask that the questions largely be focused on the specializations, as, again, today is a unique opportunity where you're able to hear directly from our senior administrators who have dedicated their time to developing these opportunities. So I really want to encourage you to focus the questions more so on specializations, although we can be broad. If you have general admissions or financial aid questions, I'm going to lightly touch on those towards the end of the session. But again, thank you everybody for joining. And then just to briefly sometimes this is a fun exercise for me, and it's helpful just to make sure it's a shameless audio test. I always like to learn where everybody's joining us from. So if they want to just type in, perhaps even in the Q&A, if you want to go ahead and type in which city you're based in, I always love to see that because it's helpful for us to see just what a diverse audience we have. Los Angeles, welcome, Hennessy. I'm so glad you can join. Tampa, Florida. Aisha, I'm from Tampa, funny enough. Denver, excellent. Oakland, welcome. Buffalo, New York, Boston, Budapest, Hungary. Oh, I'm so glad. Nigeria is represented. Excellent. Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you everybody again for joining. And again, I think the fact that you're from across the globe is always very impressive. As we all know, the climate crisis is a global issue. So we want to develop a very global learning community to address this. So moving right along, again, the agenda, I'm going to touch on Columbia Climate School, giving you just a little bit of background and history on the school itself. We're then going to deep dive into our specializations, beginning actually with climate in the built environment and then disaster risk management. And then finally, we will conclude with financial aid and the ever so riveting application process for admissions. So something I always like to note is that Columbia Climate School is the newest school within Columbia University. And when you describe Columbia University, you're referencing the fifth oldest institution in the country, the oldest in the state of New York. And you can think of the university as an umbrella, and underneath that umbrella are over 20 schools, both graduate and undergraduate schools. Columbia Climate School was announced in 2020 and officially launched in 2021. And it's a global leader in climate and sustainability education, both at the undergraduate and graduate levels. Education programs at Columbia Climate School provide the interdisciplinary knowledge base for future climate leaders to work with businesses, communities, governments, and civil society to address the climate crisis. And something I always like to anchor kind of our history whenever we discuss Columbia Climate School, because I don't want you to think that this school was developed out of thin air by any means, is that Columbia University has a very long-standing history, specifically in environmental sciences and sustainability. And our story really begins with Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory. Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory has a 70-plus year history here at Columbia University. In fact, it's photographed there on the lower left-hand side. It's a 189-acre campus on the Hudson River. And we have many different research centers based there. There's, in fact, over 300 PhD researchers based there. And a fun fact about Lamont Doherty is, in fact, The first model to accurately predict the El Nino weather event was actually developed at Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory. So we have a very long-standing history with Lamont. And then, of course, the Earth Institute, which was launched in 1996, is the largest research institute at Columbia University with over 750 environmental scientists, policy managers, lawyers, engineers, working on issues of sustainable development and environmental management. So all that is to say, Columbia Climate School has a very long-standing history within, again, environmental sciences and sustainability. So the MA in Climate and Society, of course, is the program that we're going to be discussing today, specifically focusing on the specializations. It's really to train students to understand and address the impacts of climate variability and change on society and environment. And really what we strive for within the MA Climate and Society program is to have a very diverse learning community, students from both the social sciences as well as the classic STEM backgrounds, all working towards addressing the climate crisis. And many times we have students that come from social science backgrounds and they're excited about the program, but they might be nervous about the scientific aspect, specifically in the climate core. So we have a dynamics course, we have a quantitative methods class that really goes into the kind of the science behind the climate crisis and understanding the data. And they said, do I really need to understand that? And what we always like to stress is that if somebody stops you on the street and asks, do you believe in climate change? And you say yes, and then they ask you why, we want you to be able to communicate why climate change is occurring, to whether it's to somebody with a scientific background or somebody that doesn't have that background. So we want you to be able to convey the why, and that's why the science is so critical in our curriculum. Again, we take an interdisciplinary approach to addressing the climate crisis, and many of our students find the elective journey being so flexible, extremely exciting. So the idea of being able to cross-register for your electives within this 34 credit hour program, 12 credits being electives, is very exciting. And then some of our students are looking for a slightly more curated experience in their elective journey, which we're going to talk about shortly. So that being said, let's now discuss really what are the specializations. The specializations, they're an optional component in our program, and they provide students with the opportunity to focus their elective courses on a particular area of study and gain tools and knowledge relevant to that specific career path. So students will need to take at least a minimum of 3 courses to fulfill that specialization. And those specializations include climate and the built environment, with the which was in partnership with the Graduate School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation, and then, of course, disaster risk management. So now I'm going to go ahead and transition over to Danielle and allow her to talk a little bit more about climate and the built environment.
Okay, thank you so much. So in the chat, can I ask you guys, how many people have studied architecture, planning, preservation, real estate, anything like that? Or is this all new? Would you be new to this? Anybody with a background, let me know. No. Okay. So I'm going to then not go too deep hold on. One new. Okay. Just wanting to know who my audience was to talk about the courses or the school potentially in the right manner. So to describe the School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation first, because we would be partnering or are partnering with the Climate School. At the school, we have a number of different programs that offer a number of different courses, which students then are allowed to take in this specialization, which is focusing on the built environment. The school is made up of all graduate programs. In architecture, we have different level programs. Architecture, professional program for first-time architects, architecture program, it's called Advanced Architectural Design, for students who already have their license, have worked and come back and do another degree in architecture. We have urban planning, urban design, historic preservation, real estate development, and even a curatorial studies program. All these programs look at the built environment and, of course, the crisis in climate change in very different ways. We then offer courses for climate school students to fulfill these three requirements in the specializations. And what I'm going to go through today is I'll go through quickly 4 classes that are examples that we're offering this semester. But I want to focus on the fact that we will probably offer more and that the school is very flexible. I want to say that Columbia schools, we have formal and informal relationships. Thus far, any student at the climate school who's wanted to come into our classes, we have allowed. We have a very good relationship with the school, and we want to continue that relationship. So if anybody, like I was thinking, has a background or has a focus, which is outside of the examples I'm giving, it doesn't mean it wouldn't be open to you. You should always ask questions at Columbia. I know Jeff is very, very flexible with his program in terms of timing, schedules, everything. And I want to reiterate that the School of Architecture is also. Can we go to the next slide? Because I'm not controlling them, I don't think. Okay, so timeline, the way the specialization in the built environment works is you take 3 classes. Generally, you'll take 1 in the fall and 2 in the spring, but we do have some students who wait and take all 3 specializations in the spring. Like I said, we're very flexible. There isn't a requirement for you to do it in any specific order, or that you have to take a prerequisite of 1 class before another. We can go to the next slide. I'm gonna just go through these a little quicker. So the first example we're offering this year, I also want to say this class and all 4 examples that we are offering this year are taught by tenured faculty at GSAPP. So they are senior faculty. Most of them are running different programs. So you're really getting the best of the best in terms of the classes we're opening up. This class called Towards Resilient Cities and Landscapes is taught by Kate Orff, who is the director of the urban design program at GSAPP and just became a dual appointment with climate and architecture. This class is usually in the format of a small public workshop with a broad set of stakeholders involved in it. The course explores urban design, urban planning through resilience, and it focuses on emerging strategies for ecological imperatives and social justice, really looking at the next century and how we're going to be acting. Okay, then the next class I wanted to mention quickly is called Footprint, Carbon and Design. This is taught by David Benjamin. This is a seminar in the Master of Architecture program. It fulfills a building technologies distribution. Does not mean you have to have a background. David, as I mentioned, is also a senior faculty member. He runs a firm called Living Architecture. You might have seen some of his work. He's quite famous for walls that will move when you come next to them, or he had an installation in the East River that transformed as pollution was found in the water. Really innovative projects. And he's mostly interested in accelerating decarbonization. He's looking and thinking about the footprint of architecture, the footprint of not just buildings, but also energy, water, labor, fairness, biodiversity, and then looking at how do we make design decisions and have a global impact. He does this through research. Then they do, like this example of this student's work, Lucas's, through visualizations, and then develop strategies to move forward. Okay, I'm going to keep going quickly. Unless people have questions, you can put them in the chat. The third course is taught by Michael Bell. Michael teaches a class which bridges both history of architecture and technology for master's students. It is like a post-1800 Northwest history class, but he's done extensive research in materials in the modern age, let's say. This class examines the demands of climate change, merging with these factors that shape settlement, and specifically looking at housing and how we can start to rescale housing. Okay, and then let me go to the next class, which has become very popular this year. Reinhold Martin is teaching this class. Reinhold used to run the Buell Center for American Architecture. He is right now the chair of Global Thought at Columbia University. He is also our coordinator of history theory and architecture. And Reinhold in this class, Climate, Technology, and Society, is considering a wide range of technologies and technological systems with emphasis on military technologies. He structures his class with two things. One, he has these weekly mini lectures on global history, focusing on case studies around the world. And in parallel, you'll do these weekly readings that are highlighting these issues in technology as a way of doing studying and research. And then the last course I think I'm going to mention is a studio. Now, GSAPP, I don't know, Graduate School of Architecture, we are famous for our studios. That's the way in which we study architecture, teach architecture. Usually a studio is 8 to 12 students in a small group working on a real problem in the world. This studio was the Urban Design 3 studio last spring. This was offered, and that studio investigates the process of urbanization in a global context. It's a travel studio. Recently, they've gone to Rio de Janeiro, Mumbai, Accra, Budapest. Last year, they were in Colombia, with also partnering with a policy class at the climate school, a smaller class. We will always offer a studio, but students outside of GSAPP take the studio as a seminar for like a smaller level of credits, because at GSAPP, a studio is 9 credits. That is not an elective. For you guys, we do offer like 3 credit options. Another studio we're doing right now, we just had the president of the university and the congressman from the Bronx. It's a Kingsbridge studio with a seminar attached. It's, if you're in New York, in the Avery Hall, where we're located on the 4th floor, there's an exhibition right now on the work. And you can see how we set up these seminars for interdisciplinary students to collaborate in our studios. Even if you aren't, you know, an urban designer, you have a different expertise and a different way of contributing, and it's a very collaborative process. I think that is the last class. And then the next slide. Yeah, I guess the only thing I would mention and highlight again is that we are very flexible. The schedule is an example. If anybody has questions or, you know, other things they want to study, I mentioned we have curatorial studies, and there's a lot going on right now at the school with climate and exhibitions, and using, whether it be through the material or production processes. So there might be other opportunities and ways by the time you guys apply and land at Columbia. And I just want to encourage you to bring your expertise to the school, and hopefully we can address that. Let's see, are these classes more structured in a way that public policy courses? The seminar courses are, they have different formats. I would say most seminars at GSAPP are workshop style. So there will be, part of it will be a lecture, but part of it's going to be somehow hands-on, collaborative, and presentation are always involved. Our cross-registration class spots competitive for climate students? Right now, I think we have been able to accommodate everybody who has an interest. And we're going to hope that will be the case in the future too. As I said, we're really flexible. Our school really deals with a lot of issues because of the building, you know, built environment deals with climate so directly and in terms of carbonization. So yes, we will try to accommodate. Are there any classes relating to coastal area resilience specifically? Yes. So Kate Orff, one of her resilience seminars is coastal resilience and deals with water, as well as we have a number of water studios that also have a seminar component too. So that, I think, ends my spiel. And thank you very much. Oh, well, I know this is new collaboration. Yeah, most of the people, okay, so the question is about whether you can do the specialization without, previous experience. And yes, yes, yes. GSAPP is quite interdisciplinary, and actually even the urban design program, which we're partnering with the climate school a lot, does not require a background in architecture any longer. So there are lots of opportunities for interdisciplinary research, and that doesn't mean there won't be people who do have an architecture background and expertise, but we find that mixing student populations is much more productive. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And now just going ahead and transitioning on to Jeff to discuss the disaster risk management specialization.
All right. Well, thanks for being here, everyone. Great to see you. I guess I can't see you, but I can feel the presence, and so that's very I don't know, I lack the vocabulary for it, but it's a good thing. All right. So yeah, disaster risk management, this is sort of an interesting area, and we'll sort of talk about this. You see disaster sort of talked about in a lot of different fields of expertise. And, one of the reasons why I think it's such a special place within the climate school and within climate society is because the program is really built to accommodate the intersection of a lot of different areas of science, of a lot of different areas of inquiry that come together, whether it's in the built environment, whether it's with disaster management, whether it's in a lot of the different areas that the program covers and that the school is continuing to grow and address, is really at that intersection. And so with this, I think one of the key differentiators with this program is that we have, folks coming from all different fields, right? And we understand disasters as really a consequence of climate change, as well as other factors. It's not solely related to climate change, but it's how a lot of people engage on the topic because they've been affected, or their loved ones have been affected, or they're seeing these things, these flooding events overseas or fire events here in the US. And a lot of folks, when they leave the program, go off to work in a lot of different fields, in finance or humanitarian or government. And so really what we're looking at here is how can we develop a skill set for folks who are going to be doing work that has an impact on disaster resilience and disaster response and disaster recovery that might not necessarily identify, or maybe you do as a disaster manager, but what are those key skills? What are those key things to understand? So the courses that we have here, and with the specialization is 3. We have 3 that we're currently offering, and a 4th that we're working on and hopefully offering this summer. But the first one is climate change and disaster management. Then we do one focused on recovery. And well, we're going to get into this in the next few slides. We can go to the next slide. All right. So the first course, climate change and disaster management. So this course, I teach this, so don't let that scare you away. But this course is actually taught online. So we have a set time that we do it. It's just we do a lot of our work is in the field, and a lot of my work is in the field. So I think last year I taught this course from 3 different continents and 5 different time zones. But we do look for opportunities also to meet up in person and things like that as well too, being based here on the Morningside campus. So of all the courses I mentioned, this is the only one that's online. I will say too, we have had situations in the past where students, as a term of their scholarship, couldn't take an online course. So we've actually been able to address that. I was able to write a letter to essentially explaining it's to the same standard, and here's the curriculum. So don't let that scare you away. I can work with you on that. But essentially what this comes down to is I mentioned disaster and resilience as the intersection. This graphic I borrowed from with attribution. I stole it. What they say, good writers borrow, great writers steal. I'm a great writer. So on resilience, and they looked at a literature review on how resilience is defined, and what you ended up with is this map. The conference was on urban resilience. You could just get rid of the word urban, but you have planning elements, you have anthropological and social elements, psychological elements, there's political elements, which of course we know, there's ecological elements. And so these all sort of intersect to kind of create this experience of disaster resilience. So this first course is a survey course. So each week we sort of look at a different angle. We'll look at vulnerable populations and how that's defined and measured. We'll look at different disaster administrative structures. We'll look at leadership issues. We'll look at disaster research methods and things like that. So we sort of try to take a good sampling of all of these different areas that sort of intersect in the disaster experience. And so the courses themselves involves guest lecturers, lectures, and discussions. But the projects is based around sort of two sets of projects. So the midterm and the final paper is value proposition. So the idea here is that you come up with a resilience initiative that you're interested in, and you develop 3 papers. Don't worry, they're short. I don't want to read anything longer than 2 to 3 pages. So they're 2 to 3 pages each. But it's this idea that when you go out there with these different groups, especially outside of the scientific community, they're going to read shorter papers and sort of want a summary. But what is the value they're looking for? How you would explain the value of flood walls to a Wall Street bank in the area versus a historically disadvantaged community in the area, you might talk about the benefits differently. You might emphasize different things differently. So how do we sort of match sort of the benefits from these initiatives to the audiences that we're talking about to engage and anticipate that? Because as much as the disaster is the intersection of all these, the solutions are the inverse of that. You have to reach out to multiple sectors simultaneously that have different interests and different agendas. And so the midterm is an abstract, and then the final is the papers. The other we do a group negotiation where we have different sort of resiliency issues where there are conflicts out there. And so we do some mock negotiations on 2 different sides of an issue. And so we do that it's sort of a real-time negotiation between the 2 opposing groups in the class. And so again, to try and take all of this sort of understanding of the landscape and then do just some very applied, and I would say these are situations that we find ourselves in, and I find myself in the work as very directly applied to the way that we do things. So after that, we get into the next course. We can go to the next. Awesome. Yeah. The post-disaster recovery. So one of the things we find out after disasters that are some of the most chronic and challenging issues are housing and economic recovery. These are huge drivers, and it's very uneven, the benefits of this and how this works. And so while the first course is a survey covering a broad area, this starts to do a deep dive into some of these areas. And so here are some examples here. I'll draw your attention to the bottom graphic on sort of looking at recovery. When we see disasters on TV, what do we see? We see the immediate impact, and then we'll see maybe a 1 year later story. And even that is sort of carefully tailored. Are they showing the rebirths? So they're showing the downtown area that's up and running again, but ignoring the poorer neighborhoods that aren't, or are they doing the opposite? They're like zooming in and framing that destroyed building, but not looking at the others. And the reality, of course, is much more mixed and much more dynamic. That's a very complicated thing. You're dealing with building techniques, you're dealing with community planning, you're dealing with permitting, you're dealing with supply chain issues, you're dealing with economic issues. So this really gets into case studies. And that's where a lot of the other courses really get into, is that we have all these different areas of science, but disaster is a context. It's a context of all those different elements and how it plays out in different contexts. So this uses a lot of, this course uses a lot of case studies, as well as some simulations and some exercises as ways of sort of exploring the lecture and the issues really in the deep context of the cases and the circumstances, and gives you a chance to sort of build some of those cases as well as work through some simulations. And we can go to the next one. And then when everyone else is hanging out at the beach in the summer, shame on them, because you'll be, no, I don't know where I was going with that. I was going to make a joke, but I couldn't figure out how to finish it. Just pretend it worked and it was funny. So we have a 1.5 credit course, and this is taught in person. This is done over, I think, what is the summer session? 6 weeks, 7 weeks, a couple of weeks.
6 weeks. Yeah,
6 weeks. That's right. 6 weeks. It's all a blur. So there are 2 summer sessions, and one of the ones we do, this is a 1.5 credit course on building equitable community partnerships and disaster management. And here we do a little bit of theory. We sort of reiterate and revisit some of the theory, but we really go deep into case-based learning and sort of really talk about, because when we talk about this, we talk about equity, we talk about community partnerships. What does that actually look like? What is the theoretical underpinning? But more importantly, how do you do that? Who do you call when you're trying to figure out who to bring into a workshop or who to bring into a community meeting? Who should you invite? How do you make sure you have areas that are historically disadvantaged? What are the types of extra effort that you would do? What we did with the last class was we did a series of case studies and case-based learning. We actually had a project with a client in the Chicago area, a utility, And so here you actually see an output where one of the things that they were looking for was help in their strategies for community outreach. There's all these investments going into modernizing and decarbonizing the grid. And a big part of that is community engagement and equity. And so the team, the class actually built this guide for the utilities. So this is not theory. This was actually provided to the team working with the utility and is actually actively informing some of those strategies. So as you'll see sort of over the course of this progression is sort of getting from what is the landscape to getting more and more into some of these nuanced areas and really building practical skill sets throughout the way for engaging this. The fourth one we don't have up yet, but looking at for folks who are interested in doing disaster research. So you do a lot of disaster research methods in other parts of your academic career and even within the core program for climate and society. Disaster research is usually the application of those things that you've already been taught. And so we're developing a 1.5 credit course that's also focused on how you would apply these qualitative and these quantitative research methods within the ethical challenges as well as the resource challenges and the complexities of a disaster situation. So more to come on that one as well too. I think that's it. Is there one more for the? Oh yeah. And so yeah, for the example schedule, so we have the first course now. So as we have it right now, climate change and disaster management is this year it's in the fall, which I think has worked out pretty well. Last year we sort of had, it doesn't matter, this year it's in the fall. In the spring is the post-disaster recovery course, and then summer session 1 is the building equitable partnerships, that 6-week, that 1.5 credit course. And yeah, happy to chat more, happy to answer any questions. Really looking forward to seeing all of you in my class. I will take it personally if each and every one of you don't enroll and sign up for my class. So
That's great, Jeff. And Jeff, I laughed at the beach comment.
yeah. I will say too, it's also something we do take into consideration. We want the course, and last year was the first year we did that summer course, is we want to make sure that it builds upon the work that's been done. It's fun, as engaging, and again, you guys work really hard, so it's you know, yeah, we take that, we want to make sure that it's rewarding and not oppressive workload at that stage.
And I just want to reiterate to everybody to please make sure to continue asking questions about the specializations, especially disaster risk management. If there's any questions relating to the course content, or even kind of what you could expect career-wise, feel free to ask them now while you have Jeff. Like I noted, it's a special opportunity to be able to speak to our senior administrators in this way. So definitely ask the questions.
I will say too, just as we're on it, and feel free to share my email as well too for folks who want. You know, in the first class, I always ask folks, you know, to raise their hand on, or no, in the introductions on what is why did you take this class? Why are you interested in disasters? And we get a lot of folks, I'd say 2/3 or 3/4 say, I don't know how this fits into my career, but it seems important and it seems really interesting. So if you're not sure with what you want to do with disasters, that's okay. And in fact, I think the first course is really designed to sort of give that exploration. And then we actually have a lot of folks who, you know, continue on in their career direction, and this is now a part of what they carry with them. And we do have a lot of folks who actually end up steering their career more towards some of the opportunities within all of this. But it's just a long way of saying that if this seems of interest, and I think if either of these specializations seems of interest, but you're not entirely sure how it fits in, that's okay. That's sort of how these are designed, is to give you the opportunity to explore them and explore how they can complement it. It's enough that you're interested to get started.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And oh, another question asked, yes, somebody asked if it would be possible to connect with students that are currently in the specializations. And absolutely, Cassie, I'm happy to facilitate that. If there is a student that you'd like to connect with, perhaps that's currently in climate and the built environment or disaster risk management, we can definitely do that. Bearing in mind, this is the first year that we launched the specialization. So the students I would connect you with right now have a semester under their belt in these courses, but we definitely are happy to facilitate those connections. So now I'm going to briefly go over financial aid and, of course, the application process, and then we can go back into Q&A, and I just want to encourage everybody to ask questions, especially as it relates to the specializations, because that's the driving thrust of today's session. I want to just stress that there is financial aid available. The first bucket I like to touch on are fellowships. So we do have merit-based fellowships. They're called Climate and Society Fellowships. Approximately 50% of our incoming class receive Climate and Society Fellowships. You're automatically considered for them. They are merit-based fellowships. The key there is making sure that you apply by the priority deadline, which is January 15th, 2024 this year. So if you are keen on being considered for a fellowship, we strongly encourage you to apply by our priority deadline, which is January 15th, 2024. And when I say apply by, I mean submit a complete application by January 15th. We also have something called departmental research assistantships. These are opportunities for you to work in the fall and spring. It's $6,000 in total compensation. We offer roughly 30 departmental research assistantships each year, and these opportunities are made public to our admitted student population around the month of June, and you will learn if you receive a departmental research assistantship between August and September. And then finally, I always recommend reviewing external fellowships. We do have an external fellowships directory on the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences website that we always encourage. Now is the time to start researching external fellowships. And I will say we are putting together kind of a Google Doc on different external fellowship directories and organizations that our students have found helpful. And we'll be emailing that out in the next week. And then finally, I will say that a lot of our students utilize federal and private loans to help fund their degrees. And in terms of our Office of Financial Aid, because the MA in Climate and Society, interestingly, used to be within the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, we are still partnering with them specifically for financial aid purposes. So our Office of Financial Aid is housed within the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, and they are the team that will package you, so to speak. So when you apply for federal aid and private loans, they will be the team that works with you. I will say for any of you joining the call that might be international students and are interested in funding through private loans, there are two organizations that work with a large number of our international students here at Columbia University, Empower and Prodigy Finance, that do not require a cosigner from a US citizen. So just, again, offering those opportunities in terms of your research, and that is available on our websites. In terms of the application process, I can't stress this enough. It is absolutely a holistic review. This is not a formulaic process of X test score times Y GPA is an up or down decision. Our admissions committee takes a great deal of time in wanting to better understand your candidacy through your statement of purpose, through your resume, through your letters of recommendation, and of course, your academic journey through your transcripts. So again, when I say holistic review, it means all elements of your application are fully reviewed and considered. In the online application, you will upload your resume. We ask for 2 letters of recommendation. One of the letters must be academic if you've been enrolled in a university within the last 5 years. And I do occasionally get some students, in fact, during our application tips and strategy session, one of our current students, Lily, noted that she had been out of school for more than 5 years, but she still chose to submit a letter of recommendation that was academic, and that's fine as well. But if it's been more than 5 years, you have the flexibility of submitting 2 professional recommendation letters if you so chose. We also ask for your unofficial college transcripts. If you attended multiple institutions, we ask for all of them. So let's say you went to NYU for undergrad, and then you went to University of California at Berkeley for graduate school. We would need both of those official college transcripts. And also for those of you joining us whose English, if English is not your first language, or if English was not the language of instruction in your undergraduate university, we will ask for you to submit an English test score. We have 3 options. You could submit either the TOEFL, the IELTS, or the Duolingo English test. So we just need one of those tests. And because, of course, English is the language of instruction here at Columbia University, and it's a very rigorous and rewarding experience, but rigorous nonetheless, we need to ensure you have the necessary English foundation. So we do have a minimum score of a 100 on the TOEFL, a 7.5 on the IELTS, and then finally a 135 on the Duolingo English test. The final component is your statement of purpose, and I always like to say this is the element that you have the absolute most control over, and it's a critical component because this is your opportunity to truly share your fit with the admissions committee, to share your climate story, for the admissions committee to really understand your goals and motivations, how you wish to work in the climate space, and why our program in particular is going to be critical for you to make the greatest impact. Another element I always like to note that's helpful is that in the admissions application prompt, we do ask you to share with us which core course you're most looking forward to pursuing. So perhaps it's climate mitigation, perhaps it's climate adaptation, or maybe it's the quantitative methods course. You're very jazzed about climate data and telling a story based off of it. Don't ignore that element of the statement of purpose. Make sure to share with the admissions committee which climate core course you're most looking forward to. And I'll add another layer of nuance here since we are in the specializations info session. But if you do select that you're interested in a specialization in the admissions application, which that is a question in the admissions application, are you interested in a specialization? And if so, which one? It's also helpful to indicate in your statement of purpose and weave that in as well. That can also be helpful for the admissions committee. Although I do want to note that the program is very flexible. So if you're admitted, and let's say you did not choose a specialization at the time of your admissions application, but maybe a month before the semester is to begin, you decided that you do wish to, in fact, pursue a specialization. Our program administration is flexible, and they have informed me they do plan to, again, solicit feedback from our admitted students whether or not they wish to actually declare a specialization, because we also recognize that people might change their minds. And I believe we're going to have another one of these sessions for our admitted students next year. Again, our priority deadline is January 15th, 2024. Everybody joining the session today should be applying by the priority deadline. Decisions will be released in March, and it's definitely recommended if you are interested in climate and society fellowships considerations. Again, roughly 50% of the class receives one, and they range anywhere from $10,000 to upwards of $35,000. And then finally, our final deadline is March 1st, 2024. And now I'd love to transition back specifically to our Q&A. And I do want to note that if you have any follow-up questions, I know Jeff generously noted that he's more than happy to correspond with students interested in the disaster risk management specialization. We always ask prospective students to feel free to start corresponding with us to begin the journey, so to speak, and then we'll definitely connect you with Jeff as well. And now let's go ahead and make sure to take a quick look at Q&A and see if anything came in that's especially helpful. That's an interesting question. So the first question is, can I still take courses from the climate school even if I'm a student at another program, let's say at Columbia? And what's interesting is, yes, there is an opportunity to cross-register at Columbia University. So for example, if you're enrolled in, let's say, one of our sustainability management programs, like the Master of Science in Sustainability Management within the School of Professional Studies, you certainly could cross-register. And that cross-registration certainly could include, for example, the Disaster Risk Management course offered within the MA Climate and Society program. Is there a PhD program in conjunction with the MA program? Excellent question, Richard. No, currently the Columbia Climate School is certainly exploring PhD programs in the future, but right now we have the MA in Climate and Society, although a number of our students do go on to PhD programs, and we have some great PhD programs within Columbia University in general that I encourage you to research. One of them, like the PhD in Sustainable Development, is in conjunction with the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, and the School of International and Public Affairs is particularly popular for students that are also interested in the MA Climate and Society. Another question that came in is surrounding that if they're a student from Pakistan, currently in Massachusetts, their undergraduate medium of instruction was English. Um, do so actually that's Mumtaz, that's a great question. I think that would really be great to have that question specifically for a one-on-one appointment, because that is a little bit more specific. So I'm going to encourage you to go ahead and schedule a one-on-one appointment with me, and we can have that further discussion. Excellent. Any other questions that came up? Rosie asked, can we submit a piece of academic work alongside our application? That's a great question, Rosie. We do not have another section to upload an additional document, so we really are sticking to the resume. Now, nothing would prevent you, Rosie, from specifically hyperlinking work in your resume, if that's something that you might be interested in doing. But again, we encourage you to strictly submit the documents that we're requesting in the admissions application. Excellent questions. And again, I believe my colleague Damaris Diaz went ahead and included in the chat my one-on-one appointment scheduler. And we will be sharing a recording of this session for everybody in attendance today, certainly. And if you are interested in connecting further or having additional questions about the specializations, I can certainly reach out to Jeff and Danielle to facilitate those questions. Excellent. Well, without further ado, I just want to say thank you, everybody, for joining today. A huge thank you again to Jeff and Danielle for taking the time and sharing more about the course offerings within our academic specializations. We're very excited about these partnerships. Again, this is the first semester that we're offering specializations, and we've gotten great feedback from our current students relating to those who are pursuing them. So thank you again, everybody, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day or evening, depending on where in the world that you are joining us from.
Thank you. Take care.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.